Hello, I'm Dr. Pola Rosen. I'm the publisher of Education Update, and I am delighted to be here in New York City with Sam Koplewicz, who is a graduate of Brown University and recently completed a Fulbright program in Croatia. And to his left is Rachel Gellert, who is a senior at NYU and is applying to go on a Fulbright to Malaysia. And I thought it would be so interesting for us to hear some of the things that they decided to do after college. So, and perhaps you, the viewer, can consider also living, studying, traveling, teaching abroad, maybe on a Fulbright and maybe some other way. But Sam, can you tell us something about your adventures and some of the things that have happened to you in this? You've been abroad for a year, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay,
So I left last October 1st for Zagreb, Croatia. As we spoke about before, there's three kinds of scholarships that Fulbright offers, or main scholarships. There's the Scholar Fulbright, which is for professors to go to a foreign country for a semester normally to teach English teaching assistant jobs, which normally entails going into schools at all different levels to help with English or teach English, or to do research, which is the type of Fulbright that I was on. My research specifically was on the change in money laundering law enforcement in Croatia as they join the EU. So joining the EU is a very long process, and Croatia kind of has finished almost all the steps and will join officially in July 2013. What's also great about the Fulbright experience is that it limits you it gives you enough flexibility to work not only on your research, but to get involved in the community. And for me, my opinion of Fulbright, it's really about soft diplomacy. It's about interacting with people that you wouldn't necessarily interact with, not necessarily having the best research project at the end of your time.
how did you happen to decide on that topic?
So it's my interest in public policy started a while ago, and I concentrated at Brown in public policy. The topic really came about in a kind of fusion of ways. I'd been to Croatia once before on my semester abroad, really had an incredible experience, and the following year I was working at the permanent subcommittee of investigations in the Senate under Carl Levin. And I was having a discussion with the head of the group, the head lawyer, and we were talking about different projects that might make sense for Fulbrights, and I was speaking directly about Croatia. She mentioned that money laundering is an issue there, and that happened to be what I was working on that summer. I spent some time working on the issue and general public policy at school, and it seemed to be a nice fit.
Terrific. And Rachel, would you tell us a little bit about what you'd like to do abroad and how did you happen to pick Malaysia?
So as Sam mentioned, the Fulbright that I'll be applying to is the English teaching assistantship, where you pretty much apply to a country and say, this is the general idea of where I want to go, and Fulbright takes the initiative and places you in a school. It's nice because you don't have to have the full planned out research project that you need for the research grant, but it's also really nice because it gives you the opportunity to work with kids and be in the community, and really that same emphasis that Fulbright has in the research grant on just soft diplomacy, being immersed in the community, and having a lot of one-on-one interactions that you can then bring back to the U.S. And take with you and everything else that you do from there. I chose Malaysia. It was kind of a long decision-making process. I flirted between a lot of different places in Southeast Asia. I have a little bit of a background in Europe, a little bit in South America, and it seemed relatively natural to expand it to Southeast Asia, specifically Malaysia, because Fulbright offers you the opportunity in Malaysia to work with elementary school students. And my thinking on that was I have a lot of experience working with kids, and I knew that the experience could be really tricky, but if I was in a classroom with children, I'd be a happy camper and be able to make the best of it. Malaysia specifically, I ended up choosing for a lot of different reasons, the travel opportunities around Malaysia, but also just the diversity there. Malaysia is an Islamic country by law, but it's actually religiously and ethnically very diverse. It's also going through a lot of democratic turmoil right now. It has a really interesting history of independence and political inclinations. And what I've studied at NYU has been politics and social policy, with kind of a focus on the development of democracy and women's health and a lot of issues that are really being discussed in a heated manner in Malaysia right now. And so I found that very interesting.
Terrific. Now, Sam, you plan to go on to law school, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, so during my time in Zagreb, I applied to law school, which was a little bit of a difficult process being so far away, but in the end, rewarding.
And you're going to be starting Harvard Law School, but you're deferring for a year, I understand.
Yes, so I accepted at Harvard Law School, and they have a really great they are very flexible about deferment. And they kind of say, if you give us enough time and a legitimate thing that you're trying to do in this year, then we're more than happy to let you defer for a year or even two. So my plan is to move down to Buenos Aires, learn Spanish, which was definitely influenced by my time abroad. I realized that it's important to know other languages in order to both interact with and see other cultures. And then also I've had an interest of film for a long period of time that I never really felt like I've given enough time or energy to. And so I'm taking this opportunity to do both of those things.
That's wonderful. So you're going to become a lawyer filmmaker. That's what it sounds like. Maybe.
Maybe, we'll see.
Okay. Well, we've had attorneys who have become famous novelists, so why not?
Yeah.
Could you elaborate a little bit on what the benefits are to students and why they should consider studying abroad? What did it do for you in terms of either expansion of knowledge or giving you different horizons, or in whatever way you think is appropriate? But for those who are watching this, why would they consider studying abroad or a Fulbright, either one?
Well, since I haven't done my Fulbright yet, my study abroad experience actually comes from before then. A year ago, I spent 6 weeks in Madrid, Spain, studying Spanish, and then the following fall semester in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And I go to NYU, and so when I came back to New York after those experiences, it really was eye-opening on a lot of levels. I think it's a big risk to go abroad to a place that you've never been before, people whose culture, language, even religion is very different from yours. But I think you learn that there's, while it's definitely nerve-wracking, there's so much to gain that it ends up being worthwhile. You figure out how to balance the good stuff with the bad, and it definitely made me a lot more confident going forward and taking risks and maybe questioning exactly what I want to do. I think there's a lot of emphasis, especially the way education works in this country, to go from A to B to C in a very specific, well-planned out manner. And I think when I came back from Spain, and especially from South America, where the culture is much more laid back, you're encouraged really to look at a few different options, and none of it has to happen right away. It made me kind of sit back and look at all of the things that I really am passionate about, and realize that maybe I can kind of set my own course and take a couple risks, go back abroad, meet new people. It definitely opens a lot of doors that you didn't see beforehand.
Sam, what do you think? Why should people consider going abroad?
So I think that that study abroad and my experience in the last year have been two different experiences. So I'm kind of going to try and address them separately. I studied abroad in Berlin, and it was an incredible experience. Possibly the best part of the experience was coming home. When I came home, not only was I happy to see friends and family, but it allowed me to kind of look at my life from an outsider's perspective. I had been in a foreign country, I had traveled to other foreign countries, and had been observing other people. And finally, I was able to come home to my community, my socioeconomic group, and see what it is that was strange about it, or that I felt at home with, or what I liked or what I didn't like. And for me, that was really valuable. It was valuable both at home and then when I returned to school, and I was able to reassess the importance of being at school and what I was trying to get out of the experience. And I really think actually my years after going abroad at school were much better than before because I had much more direction. I knew what I wanted to do, and that was based mainly on my experience abroad. This last year was a little bit different. Granted, I should say I just got back a week ago, so I don't think all the effects have settled in.
Welcome home. We missed you.
Yeah, thank you. But the experience was great, and I started to really live in Zagreb, Croatia. I had a lot of friends there, both from Croatia, from Zagreb, from all over Europe and the world, and I really felt it at home, which was a great feeling. But what was most powerful for me is that I was able to connect with the community and also connect with the community in a larger scale than I feel like is easy for me to do here. So I could talk to anyone there, well, anyone who spoke English. And I was able to have conversations, listen to people's lives that I would never really be able to hear in any other context. One, because they're in Croatia, but also because I was a foreigner. And by being a foreigner, it puts you in this kind of special place where you don't have any ties and people are willing to open their doors, their minds, their lives to you. And it's very moving and also a great experience.
Are there any lessons that we in our education system in the United States can learn from the countries that you've been to or some of the schools that you've seen? I know we sometimes feel that we have the best, but I wonder if we can't learn from others.
The first thing that jumps to my mind whenever I compare our school system to other ones that I've seen, it's the language component. I went to a public school in rural New York and started kind of learning Spanish in 7th and 8th grade, and really didn't take that much out of it. The emphasis wasn't really on learning the language. It was on maybe completing whatever curriculum we had to, and it's immediately out of your head as soon as you leave the classroom, versus in Buenos Aires and in Spain, classes are bilingual in elementary school. Kids growing up, and I think it's a great equalizer, especially in our country for English and Spanish, and especially in a place like South America or in Spain. It really gives you incredible opportunities. I'm really feeling the hit now after spending so much time in Argentina and abroad, and having friends who either went to private schools or different schools that started language really, really young, and just kind of grew up with it. For me, it was much more of a struggle to figure out how to naturally just communicate and learn something so new. I think we're really lacking that.
Sam?
For me, I don't know if this is necessarily just an educational aspect or maybe a cultural aspect, but something that I've really realized is that Americans are much more focused on America and not really aware of the world around them than it seems most other citizens of other countries are. At least that was my experience in Europe. They were aware of the other countries around them. They were aware of what was going on in the United States, in many cases in South America, and in other continents around the world. To me, I think that that's a really, it's a bad thing for America for the future. I think it's resulted in our citizenry not being aware enough to really make decisions in how our foreign affairs works. And I think also that the world is growing smaller. It's easier to Skype with someone in China. It's easier to get to them in China than ever before. And that path is only getting smaller and smaller. So I think that that's one of the major differences and flaws in the U.S. Education system and maybe even a cultural thing.
Where did you live, each of you, when you went abroad? I think that's something that students would want to know.
When I was in Madrid, I lived in a homestay, but it wasn't your normal homestay situation, which was good and bad. I lived in a home with one older woman and then 6 other girls from my program. Most of us had 2 in a room. A couple people had singles. And that was great because it was nice to be with English speakers in a way, because we could all we had a nice little community between all of the girls in the house, but there really wasn't a lot of interaction with our host mother, which I really missed. When I came to Buenos Aires, I was going to be there a lot longer, so I wanted something that was a little bit more stable, and so I lived in an apartment in an area of Buenos Aires called Palermo Soho, which is really a beautiful area, very affluent, close to stores and restaurants, which was also great. But in the beginning, I definitely would have liked to have been in a homestay, the language and the cultural component.
Right. And how about you, Sam? Where did you live?
When I was in Berlin, the program that I was doing put me in dorms with other students from the United States, which was pretty good for the situation. And this last year, I started in one apartment, which didn't really work out too well, and ended up in a different apartment, 14 Teslina Street, which is...
Well, how did you find it? Did you work through do they have brokers there? Or
So they actually do have brokers, and foreigners normally use these brokers that kind of overcharge you, and the places are a little bit too nice for me at least, and expensive for Zagreb prices. So what I ended up using was a website that's kind of the equivalent of Craigslist, but for Croatia, and found a really great, very small apartment I had a futon, but I had a little kitchen wall. It's only one room.
Did you share it?
No, I was just by myself. I had a bathroom, and I was right in the center. And I was paying 2,000 kuna a month, utilities included.
How do you spell kuna?
Kuna.
Okay.
And the exchange rate when I first got there was just over $5, and then it was just under $6 by the end.
So what does that come to in American dollars?
So I was saying
Just
I was spending around 300, a little bit more.
And is that a lot of money for them?
For
Students there?
For students there, yes, it is. I mean, the average income is $1,000 a month, $1,000 a month. Fulbright, and both the U.S. component and the Croatian component, generously gave us around $2,000 a month, or just under. So I definitely felt comfortable.
Yes.
And although this place wasn't the nicest, it was really well located, and it became a cozy place that I felt really comfortable in.
And what about safety? This is something that we think about in the United States. Is my child living in a safe neighborhood? So what was the safety factor like for you in Spain or in Buenos Aires?
In Spain, I felt incredibly safe, safer than I even do in parts of New York sometimes. I mean, I've been living in New York for a few years. I'll take the subway at any hour. I used to live all the way down on the Lower East Side, and I feel pretty comfortable. In Spain, the subways, I would practically eat something off the ground. It made me lose a lot of respect for New York City's metro system. But definitely well policed, very secure. Buenos Aires was a little bit different. I wouldn't say that I felt unsafe, but my awareness was definitely heightened. When you can't walk around with your cell phone out. I wouldn't go anywhere, walk somewhere that I didn't know by myself at night, especially as a girl, which frustrates me in part, but it's the reality of the situation.
Right.
And you learn pretty quickly. You see people who don't really respect the differences of being in a city like that.
Right.
And I know a couple of stories, but the majority of people, they just end up getting their wallets stolen, which isn't the end of the world.
Right.
But it does happen. I came back to New York, and it felt very awkward to be walking down the street with my cell phone to my ear, because you can't. And the only thing that really happens is someone will come up to you and be like, you should put that away. And so,
Quickly with Sam,
Sorry.
What are some of the dangers inherent, or what did you,
In Zagreb. Okay, Berlin felt like New York, maybe a little bit safer. Zagreb is a city of really 700,000 people, even though they say it's a million. It's exceptionally safe.
Oh, wonderful. I'm going.
Oh, you are?
No, I'm going to. You make me wish that I would go. The last question for them. They have never met each other, but I have known each of them since they're very young. Sam has always been involved in the concern and care of other people around the world. And Sam, I remember when you collected pennies for Kosovo, you were so interested in helping people around the world. And Rachel, I remember when you were young and you were involved with a young boy with Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, and you gave a lot of your time to fundraising. You even started a special program for that illness. So it seems to me that the thread here in both of your lives is that you've been concerned about the lives and the fate of other people and improving the lives of others. And that seems to have carried over now into your lives as young adults and the future and what you'd like to do. So can you elaborate on that a little bit? Rachel, would you like to start?
Yeah, absolutely. What I usually say is that I feel really lucky because I figured out really early on what it feels like to feel passionate about something. When I was working with Charlie's Fund, the organization you were talking about before, I got to work with Charlie, the boy I babysits for parents. I got to see what it means to actually do something, to give something back, to take a situation that's really unfortunate, potentially devastating, and turn it into action and something that really makes a difference. And so I feel very lucky to have learned really early on that that's worthwhile, because I think there are so many issues out there and so many things that are really heartbreaking in the world right now, but to be able to realize that there's something you can do and that it feels just so good, I got to learn that early on. And so I went from Charlie's Fund and having a lot to do with kids in that organization and getting to do a little bit of youth coordinating with Charlie's Fund, which I think really is what set the flame for the stuff that I want to do now, just to be able to work, especially with young people, talk about social action and causes and what you can do if you're passionate about something, and just see that little light turn on in their eyes. It's one of the most rewarding things that I've ever experienced. And so once, it's a drug in that way. You figure out something like that you just really like and it feels right, and it's a good fit. For me, it was a combination of just, the way I tend to phrase it is just youth empowerment and social activism in that kind of way. That's why I went to NYU and decided I wanted to study politics, because that was, on the advocacy side, something that I really felt was a tool to create change. Kind of evolved more into a study on social policy and the NGO, community development side of things, which has pretty much been the basis of what I want to do now. I'm hoping to stay at NYU for a 5th year and get a master's in public administration. And like Sam's program, if I get into that 5th year, they'll allow me to defer for some time in between, which is where I'd like to do Fulbright.
Terrific, really. And Sam, how about you? That early thread of caring for others.
So I as of now, I'm not really sure which direction I want to go in. I think I still have that passion that you're talking about. And I think that relating it back to this kind of a broad theme, one of the, at least when I first kind of got involved, I think it had something to do with being a Holocaust survivor's grandchild and raised on these stories of the Holocaust and kind of how terrible this experience was. And interestingly enough, I was in Berlin on my semester abroad, and we took a kind of day trip to Weimar. And there's a concentration camp outside of Weimar. And it was a really gray day, kind of this German gray, rainy day. And we took a tour, and the whole time I really was experiencing this in a way of thinking, what would it be like to be my grandfather here? He wasn't at that concentration camp, but what would it have been like? And what would it have been like for me to be here? And it was very interesting. Afterward, there's a small museum, and I was speaking with one of the coordinators for the program that I was on, who's German. And he mentioned, we started having a conversation about our experience, and he mentioned how guilty he felt being there, and that the whole time he didn't imagine himself as a victim, but as the people kind of doing these horrendous things to other people. And he was not only a coordinator, he was also a teacher of mine, and he felt like a friend. He felt like a real human to me. And it made me realize that what happened in the Holocaust isn't about my grandfather or his grandfather, but that humans were treating other humans in this really unhumane way. And to me, that's one of the things that has kind of driven me and made me try to be more open-minded about who I want to possibly help, and also passionate about preventing those kinds of incidences in the future.
Well, Education Update is so delighted to have you here, and we wish you both good luck in your future paths. And I can only say we are so lucky here in the United States to have you both as citizens of our nation. So thank you again. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks.